Hi everyone, Howie here at Law Records. Today we're breaking down how to make Schranz loops from scratch. Let's listen to some examples of these loops in a simple drum mix. And just the Schranz loops on their own. Before we dive in, this project file and all of these loops are available on my Patreon, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Thanks for all the support over there and for the people that have picked up my sample packs. It helps me to continue doing these videos. With that said, let's start. You'll notice that before I add the Schranz loops, I've got kick, a rumble, open hat, a clap, and a percussion, a simple percussion, maybe with a couple of sounds set up already, and it sounds like this. This is essentially just the foundation of the track, and you can build your Schranz loops over this. I recommend having at least a kick and a rumble and an open hat before you build your Schranz loops to fit in with the mix. So to actually make these Schranz loops, you first have to understand what they are and how they actually fit in a track. They're often characterized by very driving, hard percussion, very distorted, lots of compression, very kind of squished sound, and they're meant to fill out the mid-range of your track. They normally sit just above your rumble and your top rumble or low percussion, and just below your hi-hats, like your open hat and maybe your 16th fast hi-hat or rhythmic hat. So they're kind of in the middle of your frequency spectrum, but they overlap with the lows and the highs as well. So first, it's really good to just listen to some examples that come straight out of a sample pack. This first one's a bit like a top loop. It's not too compressed, but you can hear that crunch in the sound. Then this is the sort of thing you hear a lot. That's like a fast 16th hat, and then on the offbeat some percussion. There's also this, which is a very crunchy style of hi-hat. It's just been absolutely squished with compression and distortion. So you hear that sort of thing a lot. That's got a kick built into it and some sort of other percussion and white noise. Again, everything's very squashed. That's percussion and hats layered at exact same time, so they're just squishing the sound together. So you're getting the idea, it's this similar sound you're listening for. You'll also get Schranz loops that have a lot of kicks, like repetitive kick drums built into them, so they almost sound like they're part of the rumble as well. So there's lots of crossover between these Schranz loops and like low percussion and even rumble. So now we know what they sound like, let's now make some from scratch. So this is the example we're going to be working with. And I'm going to show you how I made this. Essentially, I started with an Ableton drum kit, just a stock drum kit, and you can basically drag and drop in any stock Ableton drum kit. It doesn't have to be some Schranz drum kit already, some hard techno drum kit. It can just be 808s, 909s, or anything that Ableton has, and just experiment with that. And then what you have to do is make a pattern. And so what I've done is make a simple but maybe quite busy drum pattern. We've got some hi-hats, some tambourines, some bass plucks even, snare, congas, a load of stuff overlapping, and just to create kind of a thick sound to start with, and that sounds like this. Okay, so that doesn't really sound like much. In fact, it doesn't even have an open hat on the upbeat. It's just percussion mainly. So how do we turn this into something that sounds more like a Schranz loop? So what I'm going to do now is show you my processing and how you can basically change this using mainly distortion and compression and EQ and filtering to create these Schranzy loops. This is what it sounds like without any processing. And this is what it sounds like with. And we're getting that crunchy wide hi-hat that you hear in some of those examples. So let's turn everything off. Let's see how we can affect this sound one by one. So the first thing I did was just bring out a bit of mid-range and get rid of some lows. Then I've just got a little bit of digital clipping. I don't think I'm doing much with this, to be honest. I think I was just catching some tops. And then got this wave shaper, and this is going to start massively changing the sound. This is one of the best ways of getting that crunchy sound. So all you need to do is use a saturator with a wave shaper. You can just choose the wave shaper mode in here, and then basically adjust the drive, the curve, and these EQ nodes. They're the things that affect the sound the most, and you'll get all these crazy sounds. See, there's other parts of it that also sound really good and add that crunchy sound to it. If you mess with the low, it's really interesting as well. See how that increases the low. So the curve affects the sound the most, but just play with this and you'll get that Schranz sound instantly. So I've actually layered another one on top. If one sounds good, why not use another? So I've got a second one there, which is crunching up the sound even more and then come into an amp. And I know this is getting crazy. It's a lot of distortion, but it just works to create this sound. And this is what these guys are doing. Turn this off. That just brings up the floor as well. You can hear that squares it out a bit. Some of the quieter elements get brought up in the mix with that, but you can experiment with all the different types. I'm a big fan of heavy rock and lead for this style of music. Then I've just got some EQ bringing out the high mids. About 3.8 kilohertz. And then the last thing is this brute compression, which is just a preset that's in the Ableton compressor already. You can load it in, you can look it up here. Just go to compressor, you'll see brute compression on the left. So what you need to do is just load this in and just adjust the threshold. You can hear how that's just squishing the sound without and with. Okay, so it's very, very squished now, and that is what you want, because you want your hi-hat, your open hat particularly, to cut through all of this stuff. So I normally think that layering 2 or 3 Schranz loops together is the best balance. If you layer more than that, it can kind of sound like a bit of a mess and not in a good way. And if you don't layer enough, it will sound a bit thin. So I think 2 or 3 is a good balance. Try and find sounds and Schranz loops that you make or you can find in sample packs that sound different to each other, so they have some variation and they kind of bounce off each other. Otherwise, it's just going to sound very flat. The second loop I've got is this one. It's a little bit softer than the other one, and it's only got an EQ, saturator, amp, and another EQ. So it's slightly less processed, but it's the same thing. It's just another drum kit with, I think, a clap on the offbeat and actually a bass drum. Yeah, it's got a clap, bass drum, snare. And then I had one more example which I didn't end up using, which was a bit more kick heavy. I had a kick on every beat. Kick on every 16th note, maracas, all the same stuff. So different types of loops there. On the actual group itself, I also just have a bit of sidechain, just reduce the volume a little bit, and I boost the high mids and reduced the extreme highs, because again, we're focusing on that mid-range. We don't just want a load of fizz up the top. Okay, but there's actually another really good way of making these loops, and that's actually manipulating loops that you already have. So take a Vengeance loop, for example, or anything you have from your sample library, and heavily process and compress it and heavily distort it, and you'll get the right sound. Take this loop, for example, without the processing and with, and this one just has an amp in lead mode and an EQ, or this one. Some of these sound really small and weak without all this processing. I mean, that's instantly that Schranz sound from such a weak sample. So use those 3 in combination: saturation, compression, and amp. This is a good example. So it's got like that percussion and hats going at the same time. With all of this together, I'm actually soft clipping this glue compressor, so I decided to use a different type of soft clipping. I've got vinyl distortion, and I've got shifter, which is also making it sound more lo-fi. It's not changing it that much, but all of these little moves add up. You can also use bit crushing, but I find bit crushing doesn't actually sound as good as saturation, in my opinion. So in summary, to make these loops, you've got 2 real ways to do it. The first way is to make a drum kit from scratch and program in a load of sounds, make it quite busy, distort it, compress it, put amps on it, shift it. Even a little bit of reverb and delay can actually sometimes work early on in the chain, and it all kind of glues it together. So I recommend that. The other way is to add these exact processes to already existing loops, like Vengeance loops, or anything you have in your sample pack that you think could work. Just house loops basically always work really well, and they can be tiny sounds and you can make something massive out of them. Once again, this project file is available on my Patreon. Leave your comments and questions down below. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this subject. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hype, like, and subscribe. I'm aiming to get to 1,000 subscribers, and you can help me get there. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.